Hello, everyone. We're live. Welcome to Prometheian Action's Thursday live question and answer show. My name is Adam Sturman. I'm joined today with our guests, Susan Kokinda and Barbara Boyd. Welcome, everyone. This is our 9th show. We've been doing this every Thursday for the last 2+ months, and we'd really like to thank you all for joining these shows, sending in your questions, and keeping us active. So while we wait for everyone to get into the show, why don't you put in the chat where you guys are currently watching? Hello, Phoenix. Hello, Anthony. Macedonia. Metodija. Sorry for slaughtering your name. Daniel, Maine. Hello. Florida. Cool. All right, so we have everyone back. Last week, Susan wasn't here, but today she's back with us. Philippines, cool. Southern New Hampshire, awesome. Here they come. Kentucky, New York, Nova Scotia, Michigan, Ohio, Saskatoon, interesting. From Spain, Houston, California, Idaho, Pennsylvania, Los Angeles, Wisconsin, Canada, Missouri, Sussex. Welcome, UK friends and Canadian friends. Hello from Iceland, Scotland, Australia. Okay, we have representation from all over the world. Thank you so much. And we have about 50-something questions queued up. So we'll see how many of these we can get through today. I'm not going to really comment on the news because I'm sure everyone's completely inundated with what's going on in the world. So we're just going to begin here. Would you guys, any opening statements or anything?
Not really. I think we should just get to the questions. I think the questions for today will actually frame the overall situation for people pretty well.
Okay. Yeah, hold on. So I've actually, let me load them into the software right now. Hold on, they're coming. I was slack and didn't load them in yet.
Well, while you're doing that, I might as well just tell people what I was doing last week when I wasn't here. The Michigan Republican Party had its biannual policy conference on an island in Lake Huron called Mackinac Island. And I'll just briefly say what really, really struck me from the policy conference 2 years ago and the one before that is that this now is the party of Donald Trump. I mean, we have succeeded in the state of Michigan of turning the Republican Party into the party of Donald Trump. And everybody not everybody, but many of the speakers reflected the fact that the Republican Party is now the party of working people. This has taken a lot of work, let me tell you. And I hope people on this call from the United States are ready to join with us in their states in transforming their Republican parties, if they aren't already, into the party of the working man. So that's where I was last week. I just did a little filler there for Adam. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Susan. Okay, first questions are going to be on the United Nations visit. Do you think we should leave the United Nations, especially after the disrespect shown yesterday? Thank you, Tamara. And the second one here will be, hello, Susan, Barbara, and Adam. My question is about leaving the United Nations. If America leaves the UN, would it be better for our country? Would we then defend our country by ourselves? I know it's a hypothetical question, but aren't we tired of endless wars and funding other people's wars? Thank you, Jackie. P.S. Absolutely love this program. It's like being in college again. Thank you very much, Jacqueline.
Well, I'm going to answer that. I think that the question of leaving the UN is not really the right question. The question is, what the hell is this thing at this point? And President Trump really took that on directly when he called the whole climate business a hoax, which is absolutely destroying countries at this point all over the world. And, you know, you have to look at it from the context of this third British Empire, which is really what it should be called, which functions on the basis of, you know, putting forth kind of ideological frameworks, which they then stick on entire nations. And they use the United Nations to do that. And the primary ones since, 1971 and earlier than that, actually 1961, is the idea of reducing population throughout the developing sector to actually control crazy environmentalist agenda to prevent the development, the industrial development of entire sections of the world. And Trump, rather than talking about hypothetically, what is the UN and what it's about, he knows what it's about at this point. That's why his speech went directly at the problem. And people like to say, how come he's not actually naming King Charles or going after the British Empire, which we'll get to? He is. This has been the policy of the British Empire for a very long time. And they used the United Nations to actually put forth that policy and convince various completely enslaved nations, like most of Africa and the Third World, that they somehow have a voice in things by operating within this fishbowl of preconceived ideological things, which you can talk about and be pleased about, but just ask, as one of my older friends, Fred Wills, used to say, just ask them to put nuclear power in a developing nation, and you'll see what happens in terms of what this is actually all about. So, the UN can serve a very useful function in terms of actual debate and putting forth, different ideas about how nation states can cooperate. But right now, it's a completely ideologically controlled institution. And I thought President Trump sort of began kicking down the doors yesterday to actually change it, or when he gave his.
Yeah, and I just add, I think it's important to note that in his speech, President Trump did identify one particular arm of the United Nations Environmental Program. And it's always, just for our viewers, it's always important, pay attention when he drills down and gets specific about something, and then pull the thread on that. You're probably going to learn something very interesting. The UNEP was created either in the late 60s or the early 70s, I don't remember. And its first head was a guy named Maurice Strong. He was a Canadian who was basically picked up by the British oligarchy to propagate these essentially genocidal policies. In my Wednesday broadcast, I had a couple of quotes from him, one in which he said, well, in order to save the planet and mankind, we may just have to destroy industrial civilization. I mean, he really does let it all hang out. But I want to sort of then cycle back a little bit because, and I think this will be relevant to some of the questions we get a little further down the road. The original fight over the founding of the United Nations is extremely important because coming out of World War II, you had two ideas of the way the world was going to go. You had the British idea, which was to maintain the empires, the British Empire, the French Empire, the Dutch Empire, etc. And then you had Franklin Roosevelt's view, which is that you needed a world of sovereign nations where, with, as he put it, American methods of economic development, the colonial countries would be freed, the less developed countries would be allowed to develop, and you would actually have a world of flourishing nation states. Now, Roosevelt died, and by the time the United Nations was founded, where there was a certain aspect of that potential there, you immediately had the British elites, the British oligarchs move in. And one of the things they did is they repackaged eugenics. They repackaged race science, which they had all been supportive of in the first part of the 20th century. Why did they have to repackage it? Because Adolf Hitler had given it a bad name. So they repackaged it as environmentalism. And they're very explicit about this. Julian Huxley, who immediately moved into an important UN position, has a quote pretty much to that effect. We can't push this any longer. We have to push it as environmentalism. So, Marco Rubio, right before Trump spoke, did an interview on, I think it was Fox. And he made the point, what is the purpose of the UN? It has a potential, and I think that's the original intention of Roosevelt, a forum for sovereign nations to talk. That's a really good idea. But that is certainly not what it is today, and not what it has been for a fairly large part of its career. So as Barbara said, I think it's much more important rather than just walking away, although we should certainly cut our funding. I have no problem for that. Although they're claiming that's why the escalator didn't work. Yeah, right. But I think the more important question is to conceptualize what are the ideologies that you have to combat at more than just the question of walking away from the UN. We have to combat these evil ideologies, which Trump did in spades.
Thank you, Susan and Barbara. If you're just joining us, this is Prometheian Action's live question and answer show. We do this show every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We take questions primarily from our email newsletter subscribers. If you'd like to subscribe to our email newsletter and stay up to date with what we're doing, we have 3 political updates a week plus this live broadcast. If you'd like to get our email newsletter and stay in touch with us, the link is in the description. But you can also go to prom.ac or just search the web for Prometheian Action, and you'll find the link to get our free newsletter on our website. So thank you. The next set of questions are going to be on Russia. Okay, you at Prometheian Action appear to have more confidence than I do in Donald Trump's improving relationships with Vladimir Putin. I read of comments Trump made from time to time that suggest he is very disappointed in Putin's response to Ukraine. I'm disappointed in Trump allowing US-made weapons to be sold to Ukraine via NATO. This is a slap in the face to Putin. While I, too, am disappointed that Putin is pressing as hard as he is, I believe that Putin is on the right side of history. Does Trump? So what, in your view, is the actual status of the Trump-Putin relationship and the likelihood of a Trump-Putin-driven peace in Ukraine? Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Gordon, for your question. And DJT's seemingly 180-degree pivot on Ukraine has occurred after a 2-hour, very productive telephone meeting with President Xi. This is classic Donald and is predictably a page in his book, The Art of the Deal. He did not say, we'll send troops. We shall instead sell military equipment to NATO. And if NATO elects to give that equipment to Ukraine, that's up to them. In other words, this is a European issue, not a USA problem. What do you see from your perspective? Thank you, Joel and Patty.
Well, I'll take a stab at this for starters. I think Joel and Patty hit the nail on the head. This is classic Donald Trump. And after a certain euphoria in, for example, the British press, where they were saying, oh my God, he's now in our camp and so on, they kind of took a deep breath and realized, no, all he did was essentially restate the US position that this is your problem and stated it even more firmly. Some are saying he's basically walking away from the process. I think that remains to be seen. But I think the larger question of US-Russian relations still remains on track. A couple of days before this, President Putin put forward a proposal to extend the START treaty, the new START treaty, which is due to expire in February of this year, for another year to ensure for stability and the ability to discuss this through. The White House hasn't officially responded to that. They say Trump will in a couple of days. But the White House press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, said this is an interesting proposal. And there's other, really intense back and forths on economic policy with some of Russia's closest allies, like Belarus. The United States hasn't quite reopened the embassy, but it's on its way to reopening the embassy in Belarus. We've sent a special envoy over there to do that. Belarus is one of Russia's closest allies. So I think people have to not get caught up in the world of Donald Trump's social media posts. He does these, as Joel and Patty say, I think for a certain effect. Over the weekend, both the Kremlin spokesman Peskov and Foreign Minister Lavrov, this was again before Trump's tweet about Ukraine taking back the territory, like he thinks Ukraine can actually take back the territory. I don't think so. But this was before Trump's post. You know, they said, look, we understand the president's frustration, but we're looking at his deeds, not his words. So this is evolving. Obviously, it is not being resolved as Trump wanted, because you have the British and the Europeans who do not want to let go. But as the Russians said in response to Trump's statement about Ukraine, they said the reality on the battlefield speaks otherwise. So I think that the back channel, the behind the scenes discussions between the United States and Russia are still ongoing. Obviously, Ukraine is, you know, a much bigger problem than Trump hoped it would. But the question of U.S.-Russian relations is also larger than Ukraine, I would say. So I don't know if Barbara wants to add anything.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that, you know, this is the highest of highest stakes diplomacy going on at this point. And, you know, you've got to recognize that you're dealing with a Europe which is collapsing, is increasingly fascist in reality, although they keep accusing Donald Trump of being so. And, you know, I think that, you know, what he did here was to say to the Europeans and everybody who's been pressing him to drag the United States into this war, he said, let me just play out the things you're actually telling me here. Okay, let's play out what it is you're saying. Really, is Ukraine capable of actually taking back all of its territory? You know, the answer to that is Ukraine is presently, as opposed to Russia collapsing, Ukraine is being bailed out again by the IMF to the tune of more and more billions of dollars in a completely collapsed economy. Is it true that basically, you know, they could ever, you know, take all this back and that Russia is a paper tiger? Well, no, actually not. And, you know, there are a lot of people who say, well, how come Russia, as Trump said, and saying, let's entertain for a moment your idea, the things you keep telling me, all right, that Russia should have, as a grand army, been able to take Ukraine in 3 weeks. Not when you have the entirety of NATO actually on the ground supporting the Ukrainian military in proceeding, and not where you have Putin deliberately holding back from the standpoint that he can't do things which one would do in warfare, which create a situation potentially for those areas which Russia would ultimately govern, where you have permanent kinds of warfare situations going on. So I agree that this is, you know, very, very much a typical Donald Trump move, in probably in frustration from the standpoint that we keep trying to foist on him the kind of mindset as to how this war should be conducted, particularly with, you know, crazy people in the United States Senate and the House who still think that, you know, Russia is the heart of evil as opposed to the British. And there's danger here. You know, basically, I saw in the press this morning that the Russian intelligence services are putting out that British and French personnel are already on the ground in Crimea. And crazy Zelensky is running around and ranting, saying, you know, the Russians should get into their bomb shelters because we're going to use United States weapons to actually attack Moscow, in essence. All right. So the Europeans are playing a deadly game of bluff here. Trump has called them on it. And the issue really is that we have to continue to back him in the overall press for a grand deal, which actually deals with post war Europe. Okay, and so it's much larger than just Putin and Trump here. You have a real strategic conundrum in the sense that the British Empire is on its back foot and is lashing out. And we have to be very, very conscious of the overall situation, which I think Trump is. So that's the only caveat I would add to the overall analysis there.
Thank you, Barbara. So I just want to take a moment just to address something that keeps coming up in the chat. I just want to give you both a chance to address it as a quick aside. The issue of people's fears about Jeffrey Epstein and all the hoopla about around that. There's somebody in here who said he's really worried about Kash Patel and other people just trying to downplay and deny. Yeah, Scott Rose, who's in the chat here, is bringing up Jeffrey Epstein and his supposed Trump's connection to that. He's worried about it. Anything to say about this ongoing Jeffrey Epstein stuff that just continues to continue on, I guess?
Well, I think people are essentially buying into, unfortunately, a very big cyber operation by the Democratic Party and certain Republicans who are using this against Trump. First and foremost, you need to know that there's nothing in those files, aside from what the New York Times, the Washington Post, all of these other people say, which suggests that Trump had any kind of role in this entire deal here. Second, you need to understand that every single one of these witnesses, I hate to be the person who throws something into your punch bowl here in terms of how people think about this, but every single one of the witnesses here have been totally compensated to the tune of millions of dollars by the first so-called rotten plea deal, which was made in Florida on the Epstein case. That plea deal required him to pay anyone who came forward and said anything about being molested by him as much money as they demanded, in essence. All right. So you're seeing here quite a show. I don't condone, basically the idea that he was a pederast and that this actually involved massive abuse of kids potentially. All right. But I don't think that you're going to be satisfied and it involved very prominent people who are perverts. All right. But my question to everybody is, so what else is new? The elites are perverts. All right. The same people who actually can talk about killing millions of people in Africa all at once are not going to balk at abusing a kid. And I think the Trump administration has underplayed the fact that of all the kids who were brought into this country by Biden, all right, via the open borders policy, and are now lost. There's some 300,000 of them who are being trafficked. The Justice Department is actually going after that and finding them and reuniting them with their parents. And that, to me, is the critical flank against this kind of perverse network of people. To me, it's not going to convince me more that I have to defeat someone like Bill Gates or Bill Clinton, as he's become, to find out that he engaged in sexual malpractice and perversions around kids. He's done a lot of other evil things in that world, and that's what we have to fight overall. So that would be a pretty comprehensive answer that I'd give to it. It's discouraging to me that, basically people keep, getting hung up in these cyber operations as opposed to stepping back for a second and saying, wait a second, how is this? What's the overall shape of the battle here? They're out to kill Donald Trump. They just killed Charlie Kirk. What about Epstein in that context? And I think people should really think before they jump down this particular rabbit hole.
Yeah, I'll just add one other thing. People want a magic bullet, to defeat the enemy. And the magic bullet of the last couple of years has been the Epstein files. That is not the magic bullet. The magic bullet is is every patriot of every nation understanding the nature of the enemy as it plays out in economics, strategic policy, culture, obviously morality, and committing yourself to fighting it and defeating it by restoring institutions which actually reflect our values.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. If you're joining us, if you've been watching for a little bit, please do me a big favor. Please just give this video a like. We have about 1,700 concurrent viewers at the moment. If we could bring our likes up, it gives our stream here wider viewership onto YouTube. Okay, quick aside here, we're getting some super chats. I want to acknowledge Melody Hart, who's been a longtime supporter. Thank you, Melody, for the support.
Melody.
Yes, hi. At BW, who we kind of already addressed that between Trump and this is Trump flipping. Trump is not flipping. Right. Trump's not flipping. Thank you, BW. And Joss, thank you. We're going to be talking about this issue later in the stream. What will be done about the Islamic invasion of America is experiencing right now. Mosques are popping up all over the place, Muslims taking positions of authority. And thank you, Joss. And then thank you very much, Paul, for your contribution. I love your little kitty cat there. Reminds me of mine. Okay, so we're going to go to the next question, which is a little bit of a comment, but I think you both should still comment on it. I suggested recently that you folks make a video that introduces newbies to this information. I was wondering if you plan on that. Thank you all for a great job slipping in information about the British system versus the American system. People get so hung up in their Trump derangement syndrome, it's sometimes hard for them to hear this foreign control has been going on for so long. Thank you very much for your insights, Valerie.
Yes, it's on the to-do list of other projects. So yes, we're working on that. Thanks a lot, Valerie.
But Adam, could you share the screen? I do want to remind people, this is a very good kind of intro to this question of the British system and the American system. And I think especially for people who have TDS, it is a good place to start, because we make the point in this that presidents that probably some people with TDS like, maybe not, but probably like John Kennedy and Abraham Lincoln, were assassinated by British intelligence because they supported the American system. And, you know, while this is not a comprehensive discussion of the American system, it does make clear that the presidents who support the American system are the ones who are on the target list of the British Empire. So I recommend that people go either to our merch store or to our website under the toolkit and use this pamphlet as a kind of opening door, especially among those layers.
The link for this is also in the description. So if you want to download a copy of it, just go into the description on YouTube and you'll be able to find a link to it there. Okay. All right, I'm going to take the next question here, which is on American presidents. I know you count FDR as one of our good presidents, along with Washington, Lincoln, and McKinley, but it is well known that he knew in advance that Pearl Harbor was going to be attacked and did nothing to warn the American sailors. I feel that this disqualifies him from any consideration of greatness. What are your thoughts? Thank you, Rick, for your question.
Well, I simply don't think that that's a correct hypothesis. I mean, you know, we basically also at the same time as the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor still had plans called Red Plan Red and Red Plan Blue for what happens if what happens if the British came down and invaded us from Canada. That doesn't mean that he had live intelligence that this was going to happen at that particular point in time. As for, you know, and you know, Roosevelt was really hated by a substantial portion of the US population because of British propaganda operations. He came into power under assassination threat from Wall Street directly. Basically, and he went after Wall Street, which is the largest component of British influence in the United States historically, and said, basically in his inauguration speech that he was going to drive the money changers out of the temple. And he brought the United States back from being completely prone to being the most powerful economy in the world over the course of his terms. More importantly, like Donald Trump, he was among the elite who actually knew and studied during the time he was paralyzed. Abraham Lincoln understood the American system and was hated precisely because they felt that he had betrayed his own class, and was, therefore under complete threat throughout that entire period. Did he want the Second World War? Did he need the Second World War, which is part and parcel of that general line of argument as it goes? Absolutely not. But he rose to the occasion, and probably created the basis for the entire world to adapt the American system had it not been for his untimely death, and the British moving in directly right after he died. So that's how I'd answer the question.
Yeah, and I'd just add, I think, there's a certain fallacy of composition. Did Roosevelt know that we were going to be drawn into the war? Obviously, that's why he started the industrial mobilization a full year before Pearl Harbor. And it's a good thing that he did, because we would not have rebuilt and recreated our machine tool capability, which took a year to begin to even produce what we needed after we were attacked. And it really took the full 4 years of the war to get at full productive capacity, which included producing one Liberator bomber every 57 minutes at Willow Run, which I know because that's where my parents met. Was there intelligence that an attack on Pearl Harbor was part of the Japanese war plans? Of course there was. But did we know that it was going to be the morning of December 7th? I've certainly seen no evidence to that effect. And as Barbara said, I think it's part and parcel of an entire British rewriting of American history, so that we do not understand the continuity of American system presidents who go from Lincoln to McKinley to Roosevelt to Kennedy to Trump. They want to keep people in their little conservative Republican versus, wacky liberal socialist Democrat world. That's not the world. And if you live in that world, then you're not going to be effective. We don't live in that world. That's why I think we're as effective as we are, despite our small forces.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. Okay, quick recap here. Thank you for tuning in. This is Prometheian Action's live Thursday question and answer show. We do this every Thursday, same time, 11 a.m. 11 a.m. Eastern. We primarily take questions from our newsletter subscribers, but we also take questions from our super chat, from our super chats. If you'd like to subscribe to our free newsletter, I'll put the link down here. We do 3 political briefings a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Those are pre-recorded and released. We do 1 live show. This is a live Thursday show. So if you subscribe to our free newsletter, you'll get reminders when we do all of our stuff. You'll also get our written news articles, and you'll get updates about what we're doing politically, etc. So you can go into the description, the link. You can visit prom.ac or just search the web for Prometheian Action. You please also give this video a quick like. If you're enjoying this stream, if you're being engaged by our discussion here, please give this video a like and subscribe. It helps increase our reach on YouTube. Okay, so the next questions are going to be on the Brits and the Royals. If the British imperial post-war system is the real villain behind all this mayhem in the US, then why was Trump so obviously friendly when visiting their monarchy? Thank you, Linda. What was the Queen's role in everything happening? Thank you, Thor. And Trish here. The ceremony review of the military by POTUS, etc. Is that an indication for the citizens in that country as well as the USA will be changing the guard from criminality to sovereignty for all? Thank you for all you do. Happy to have found you and be here learning. Blessings, Trish. Sorry, I don't do a lot of editing on these questions sometimes. So is an indication that for the citizens in that country as well as the USA will be changing the guard, okay, from criminality to sovereignty for all. Okay, yes. And why is President Trump praising the king and telling lies in his speeches here? The whole royal pageantry is such nonsense in a country that is bankrupt and has a traitor as a king and prime minister. The average Englishman is disgusted with Charlie and Starmer. I am at a loss to understand what you say, Susan, compared to what Trump is doing. Thank you, Nolene. So these are the questions that we have on the UK and some of the royals.
Well, I'll start that. Look, I mean, again, go back to Trump's tweet on Ukraine. Trump does many things for effect. You know, the fact that he accepted this, look, turn it on its head. It's unprecedented that a president would be invited twice by the British monarch for this kind of state visit. Now, people say, why did he accept? You know, why is he giving credence to the British monarchy? Well, flip it on its head. And basically, they're acknowledging that he is somebody who basically holds the cards right now in the world. And I really think that's what that visit was. And I think it was Trump making clear, I hold the cards. I mean, his meeting with Starmer, he was brutal with Starmer on the critical questions of migration, of the attacks on free speech. You know, that was not a, you know, we all agree kind of meeting. So I think it was Trump basically saying, I am the most important historical figure in the world, and you're acknowledging it.
Yeah, just a little bit of background. I see this Bill Vickers, The Truth About the Brits Fund. I'm all for that. You know, congratulations on that. Look, I agree with Nolene that the country is bankrupt. The royals are a pain in the rear. You know, we in our former incarnation, and we don't have any relationship to Helga Zeppler-Rusch or any of her actual organizations, I have to say that. But we published a report called The Fall of the House of Windsor, which goes through all of the various entities which make up this thing called the British Empire. It's composed of the royal family, and, you know, basically, I think Charles versus Philip and Elizabeth is a step down in terms of actual influence in the world and ability to, you know, put forward these policies. But it's also, you know, a whole bunch of associated multinational corporations which have essentially one, you know, particular outlook. We want to seize and control on behalf of the Commonwealth and the British Empire all of the material raw resources of the world. At the same time, we want to actually limit the populations in all these countries that we're in the process of looting, which is exactly what they're doing. And if we have to basically, you know, figure out, and the shield we're going to use to do that is this idea that, you know, basically human beings are raping the planet in one form or another, from just first environmentalism as a process to now the entire climate change apocalypse kind of hoax. All right. So you have these various consensus institutions which are part and parcel of these kind of imperial goals. The monarchy is there to, basically create a fairy tale about what all of this is about for credulous people in the population. Kings, queens, princesses, princes, the entire, kind of Hollywood vision, which is set up around this, the gossip columns, what's going on with Harry and Meghan today versus, are they trying to diss them? All that stuff is like a soap opera sideshow in terms of the actual thrust of empire. Now, pursuant to the question which was asked, can you guys put together something? We have a pretty comprehensive series of reports which were done back in the 1990s, 1994 through 1996 to be exact, which we'll give you the links for to go to. And there's also a video which Executive Intelligence Review has on its YouTube channel called the Palmerston Zoo. And that actually deals with both this kind of entity focused around the World Wildlife Fund as a primary entity here, an entity called the Club of the Isles, which puts together the royals with all of the key multinational corporations. But it's all being done, this raw looting of the world, particularly Africa, under the rubric of, environmentalism and saving the planet, which is a pretty good and nasty British secret intelligence operation. And the British understood that after World War II, they call it, after World War I, actually, they call it, the Third British Empire, with the idea that you're not going to be able to actually control things necessarily through world wars, but you can control them by what they call soft power. All right. The rubric of what you see going on the internet in terms of psychological warfare operations designed to pull you in to various, idea formats about what's going on in the world, which really have nothing to do with reality. It's an overall plan to control people's minds and to control the entire way that we think about everything in terms of reality and human beings. And their idea always has been, that what we have to defeat is this entire notion that human beings, like in the American framework, are made in the image of God's creator, God as creator, and they participate in that ongoing creation. The British imperial idea is that men and women are beasts, and that you can actually control them through force and through leading them down all sorts of ideological paths, which go absolutely nowhere because they don't threaten the empire. And it's the American system, which is why they've assassinated our presidents, which actually totally threatens the empire.
I just add one other thing. Donald Trump's speech at the United Nations is an attack on everything King Charles stands for. So again, just sort of recalibrate your thinking in terms of the optics of a visit and what it perhaps actually meant.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question. We're going to get to, I believe there are two questions here on, we're going to take two questions on the relationship between the United States and international partners. Okay, number 11 here. When the repositioning of economic power shifts from Europe to ARC, the America, Russia, and China, will it still be necessary for the U.S. to be the predominant military superpower, or will the U.S. government downsize its military force, or perhaps integrate it into a new military alliance after splitting from NATO? Thank you, Rodney, for your question. And is there evidence that Modi, Putin, and Xi are cognizant of British machinations and the Trump rebellion and the idea of them all, when the timing is right, moving in concert against the regime? Thank you, Max.
Yeah, I'll take the Rodney. You're right. I mean, basically, in particular, Russia is quite conscious of the British manipulation of all of this, given their activities against Russia for the entire period of really Russia's history. They've always wanted, as part of British geopolitical strategy, to control what they call the Eurasian heartland, or as Mackinder put it, the pivot of the entire world. In terms of controlling resources and other things. So Xi should be much more cognizant than he's demonstrated during a lot of the recent period, but I think he's coming along, and clearly Modi, India having been the crown, British colony and really attacked throughout its entire existence prior to its liberation, is very conscious of this entire set of operating principles. As to it coming into being, well, we still have a long way to go in the United States. And that's where we have to be focused, is really cementing the Trump's movements in the United States so that we prevail here, rather than, spending a whole lot of time, trying to think about things which don't really fit into that overall framework. As to the future, Trump says he wants to end nuclear weapons, and he's putting into motion the entire idea of creating a strategic defense, or an iron dome against nuclear weapons for the United States. So you have to ask yourself, if that comes into being, what kind of relationships between nations of the world does that create? Do armies become irrelevant in a certain sense, or how are they relevant? It's a complete shift in how everybody thinks about military strategy. And Trump's idea in terms of military strategy is very simple. We don't get into alliances to engage in endless war on behalf of things which are not in our interest. If someone attacks the United States, yes, we have to respond. And we have to respond with lethal force, and we have to respond overwhelmingly and very quickly. That's the idea of just wars in terms of St. Augustine and everybody else. So I think that kind of covers the territory in terms of those two questions.
Yeah, and I'll just add well, let me just underscore. I mean, I think the kind of transformations we're talking about in terms of relations in the world, what is going to be the nature of sovereign militaries and so on, we're talking about a generation or generations in terms of reshaping this, just as we've seen the empire has taken generations in the post-war period to create supranational institutions which do their bidding. I think what's interesting is the different combinations. I see Rodney mentions ARC, America, Russia, China. I know there's, some other commentators like my friend Tom Luongo who focus on those three countries, thinking, pointing to them as the premier countries in a sense, leading a move toward a world of sovereign nations. The person who Barbara and I organized with for many, many, many decades, Lyndon LaRouche, he put forward the conception of a four-power alliance of the United States, Russia, China, and included India because of its size, both population-wise, economic-wise, military-wise. They do have nuclear weapons. But I think that the most important question is, the most important point is this question of what are the nations that have the economic power to challenge this global financier elite. And we know there's a lot of romanticism about the BRICS. I think a lot of people looking at what's going on in Brazil, looking what's going on in South Africa, are perhaps, coming out of a bit of their fantasy in terms of this being the combination of forces that is going to challenge the capitalist West. The premise is wrong. It's not the capitalist West. It's sovereign nations that want to defend their sovereignty, like the United States, Russia, India, and China want to do, despite our differences and despite our problems with each other, versus a British-run globalist system. So, you know, I think some combination, America, Russia, China, India, obviously is, I think it's very much also in Trump's mind when you look about how he's constantly stressing his good relationship with Xi, his good relationship with Modi, and obviously the kind of relationship he's created with Russia. I see in the super chat, how can we get rid of our nukes when China won't? Well, I don't think that's necessarily a permanent position by China. In a world run by globalists, probably nobody's going to get rid of their nukes. You know, as we evolve to a world of sovereign nations working with each other, I can see that potential down the road.
Wasn't this also the idea of building this weapon, this nuclear defense system that Trump wants to bring into being, is to kind of eliminate this threat altogether, which is exactly what Lyndon LaRouche and Ronald Reagan negotiated, the Strategic Defense Initiative. Maybe it was a little bit before its time back then, but now we're definitely getting close to new technologies that could potentially get us closer to systems that could make nuclear weapons increasingly obsolete. All right. Now we're going to get to the real tough part, which is going to be on Charlie Kirk. And we have to address this because we're just getting so many questions about it. It keeps coming up in the chat. So I'm going to go through about 5 or 6 questions real quick, and then we can address it overall. Okay. Is there an autopsy report on Kirk? No one's talking about the surrounding men exhibiting hand signals. You cannot break down that rifle that quick. Was Britain involved? Thank you, Carol. There have been a few videos surrounding Charlie Kirk's tragedy. Will the FBI consider the hand signaling in and outside Kirk's booth? And what was that all about? Thank you, Firefly. It seems that the FBI has the wrong person as Charlie Kirk's assassin. The story they told us doesn't stick together. People are now searching for better evidence. I don't know how you're going to judge what evidence is better, right? And it is there in video footage from many sources. Is there a secret investigation going on behind what they have told us? I have an impression that this show is for the British Empire, but the real investigation is still ongoing. I certainly hope so. What are your thoughts on that? Thank you, Jania from Poland. What's with Erica Trump's hand gesture while hugging Trump at the memorial service? Quite a controversial hand gesture on display. Thank you, Chris. Why can't Prometheian Action do a deep dive into who killed Charlie Kirk? Okay, I just want to say, we don't have any special oracle, okay? More than one person was involved besides Tyler Robinson. Okay, this person left, I don't know is his name. Okay, and then here's another nameless person. Okay, Charlie, first let's debunk a few things about the rooftop shooter 30-06 rifle from 200 yards. It's difficult to be accurate. 1 to 2 inch skilled shooter. You cannot assemble a rifle on the rooftop and install a scope and expect anything larger than 2-foot circle until it has been sighted in. It would take a minimum of 3 to 5 shots. Okay. 150 grain bullet, average size of a 30-06 would create an exit wound as large as a silver dollar and a fist, depending on what it's drunk. Where is the exit wound? The latest video of the shot appears to have come from Charlie's right side, exit from the left. From the video, it seems like it seems like a much smaller caliber was used. Okay, see the PDB. Okay, I don't think we are anywhere close to the actual facts in this case. And I think that was the last one. Yeah, so that's the last question. That really covers a wide gambit of the questions we're getting on this whole issue of Charlie Kirk. Excuse me. So I open it to Barbara and Susan.
Yeah, I'll start. Look, let's start with the last question and the 30-06 rifle. Larry Johnson on his, Substack, which I'll have Adam put the link in the description.
The link is already in the description. So
right,
yeah, everyone
right. And what it goes through is that all of this stuff that you're seeing on the internet about the rifle, the shell, and why is there not an exit wound, this, that, and the other. He does a complete takedown of that based on the fundamental laws of physics. And he does it because he basically, is something of an expert in firearms training, and he's something of an expert in terms of analyzing this particular stuff. I think that a lot of this is based on people's legitimate anxieties about whether we're going to get lied to again. And most importantly, if we don't solve this, is Donald Trump about to get shot again? And that creates an opening for, a very legitimate kind of questioning of what's going on here, particularly since the FBI and the intelligence community has repeatedly lied to the American people about all of this. Now, that said, all right, a lot of what is going on the internet is a psyop on the same level as I just described the Epstein psyop. You have to basically take into account that this is a criminal investigation, and a criminal case is being built by the FBI, not the alien FBI. Admittedly, there are still a lot of leftovers from where we actually were, but from personal friends of Charlie Kirk, Dan Bongino and Kash Patel. I don't think that they're going to basically let this one go. And, Kash Patel has an ex post out actually laying out all the things that are on the internet and saying that the FBI is taking in every single one of these things to actually investigate and provide answers to. Will all of those answers be provided to you guys before the criminal trial takes place? That's doubtful, because the rules of the Constitution, in terms of allowing a fair trial for this defendant, actually circumscribe what can and cannot be said at this point. But let me point something out to you. In that criminal case, the government has the burden of proof beyond reasonable doubt. That case will be tried in front of you. It will be a public trial. Certainly, the defense will take all of these various things which are being put forth and assert them in defense of Tyler Robinson. Kash Patel says there are other people who are being investigated at this point in time. What about the autopsy of Charlie Kirk? Do you really think we should be releasing that on the internet? It was done. It will come out in the course of the trial. It may get leaked even before that. Do I really want to see it? Not really. From my particular standpoint, I saw what happened. I can pretty much tell you what I think, from just watching it happen, the result of that autopsy is going to be. I just think that people have to have a little bit of patience here in terms of the fact that this will be tested in reality. The Trump administration could go down if people don't actually believe what they put forth as the trial evidence in this case. Think about that. So, I think that, what's happening here in the way that it's being played is an effort to actually undercut and send people off into various forms of dissonance with the actual policies that Trump is trying to get implemented right now, because they don't trust the government, and rightly so. But the issue is, can you find in your heart, the fact that we actually have a potential coming out of this to secure the 2026 midterms, to prevent a further assassination of Donald Trump by people getting off their damn couches and getting and stopping their speculations about all of this and getting out there and politically organizing as Charlie Kirk did. You lose the mission of Charlie Kirk in all of the rancid speculation about his assassination. You lose the storyline where we're actually creating the basis to take over the United States in a decent way for the first time in my lifetime, and to actually expand upon the victory which we had in November of 2024. Now, I know that's a little bit polemical for people, but I think that's kind of what's needed at this point in terms of getting you to step back and think a little bit.
Let me just summarize it in this way. Have you spent as much time organizing your friends and neighbors and strangers to go out and secure victory in 2026 as you have going down these rabbit holes? I would just say, ask yourself.
Thank you very much, Barbara and Susan. This is an issue that's so hot on the minds of everyone. Let me just circle back here. If you're just tuning in, if you've been watching for a while and this is your first time, welcome. My name's Adam. This is Barbara and Susan. We're all with Prometheian Action here. This is our weekly live question and answer show that we do every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Please like this video and subscribe to it. We do every week we do 3 political updates, one on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and we do 1 live show on Thursday. So please like and subscribe to our channel if you're new here. And if you're really interested in what we do, please visit the description. There's a link in the description to get our free newsletter. It doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to pay, but please get on our newsletter. Let us stay in contact with you outside of YouTube and Google's control. And also, just so that you know, there are tons of references today in the description of this video. So if you come on I don't know, we'll add it, we'll post them on x.com too. But if you come over to YouTube or our website, if you look in the description of this broadcast, you'll see a whole list of references in there on various points. Okay, so we're going to come back to a more domestic issue on our political mobilization in the United States. Okay, here we go. Whoops. Okay, and I'm going to fill in a word here. When did congressional lobbying start? I feel they should not be allowed to influence our lawmakers. Can the lobbyists be stopped? Thank you very much, Candy, for your comment on the lobbyist question in the United States.
Well, thank you for that, Candy. I went and looked it up. Lobbying started with Congress in 1792. That is, people would go to the first was actually compensation for veterans, getting adequate compensation for veterans of the American Revolution. A lot of that was just informal groups, joining together, which is absolutely what should be done. Our elected representatives have to hear from their constituents, and sometimes constituents are not capable of traveling to Washington themselves, so they have people and organizations do that for them. Obviously, in the more recent period, it's taken on a kind of Frankenstein character, and it was in the late 1940s that we enacted legislation forcing lobbyists to register. So we at least found out who they were and how much money they were pouring into congressmen's campaign. And I suspect that's what you're referencing at this point, the enormous power of these organized lobbies. I don't know that it can be stopped entirely. I haven't given much thought to how you could restrain without affecting First Amendment rights, some of the enormous power of these lobbies. But I think there's another answer to this, which is the ultimate lobby is the American people. And the incredible victory that they delivered to Donald Trump in 2024 has begun to shape the composition of political activity in this country. And I think the antidote to lobbying at this moment is really for the American people to organize themselves more powerfully, more effectively, to make sure that they make clear to congressmen, to senators, and others that we actually hold the cards. I don't care how much money some association or some company is going to give you. We hold the cards, because it doesn't matter how many lies the political advertisements tell you to try and sway your vote. We have informed ourselves and we have informed our fellow citizens. And we are truth seekers, as Charlie Kirk was. And we're going to make that determine our votes, not how many political ads you blow up our ass, which you'll have plenty of in 2026.
I think, honestly, if you want my opinion, the bigger issue than the lobbyists is the insider trading. Right? That is a huge deal. So you have the lobbyists plus you have the inside traders. Okay, again, here we're going to take the next question, which is again on our domestic campaign here. How do you suggest we approach our congressmen when we try to contact them to make appointments for Prometheian PAC's mobilization in October? Should we identify ourselves as PAC members, followers who are acting on your behalf? What should we answer when we ask what the appointment is about? Should we simply comment to any appointment time they have available October 6th to 10th? Please coach us. Thank you, Dennis. He's a longtime supporter from Berkeley Springs.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for that question. Here's what I would recommend. Send us an email to Prometheian Action, identifying yourself with your phone number and email address. The most effective way to coordinate setting up these appointments, both in terms of how the questions you ask, how do I approach my congressman and so on, is to be in touch directly with our team, which is going, and we've got quite a team going to Washington, D.C. that week. We've got 3 people from the West Coast, I think. We have several people from Texas. We have 2 people from Michigan. We have somebody from Florida. So we've got quite an interesting team, and I think some others may be joining us, at the last minute. So the best way to do this is just be directly in touch with the team that is going. They can walk you through the best way to approach. One of our supporters actually wrote out a little draft script about why, you want them to meet with these Prometheian representatives. Some people are choosing to use that. Some people are choosing to freestyle it. And in terms of the appointment times, we have a pretty big team, so we can probably accommodate everything. But again, the best way to do it is to be directly in touch. So just shoot an email back to Prometheian Action. We'll get it. We'll pass it on to the team, and we'll take it from there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I think we should probably just brief our audience here a little bit more on what we're doing. And here's a question again from a massive supporter, Jerry from Palmer, Alaska. I'm sure he's watching right now. What would you speak to the rate of subscriber and donation growth both in the USA and globally? Specifically, is Prometheian growing fast enough to affect the 2026 midterm elections? Let me just say a brief thing on this, on a Prometheian Action subscriber growth. I want to thank all of our paid subscribers. We're just shy of 2,000 paid supporters from across the world, right? We've definitely helped stabilize Prometheian Action and allowed us to produce these political briefings and these live shows. It's much easier, so we thank you for that. But we also have another part of our organization called Prometheian Action.
PAC.
Prometheian PAC, Political Action Committee, Prometheian Action, and then we have Prometheian PAC. And the difference is that Prometheian PAC is the organization that can actually spend money directly on affecting the outcome of federal campaigns. So congressmen and senators, other people on the federal level. So I open it up for Barbara and Susan to speak a little bit about what we're doing for the 2026 midterms, because that's our next target.
Well, I think the most important thing in terms of 2026 occurred in the response to Charlie Kirk's assassination. In that what you're seeing is an across-the-board recognition that this nation truly is at a turning point. And that it is a question, if you listen to Stephen Miller's speech at that remembrance, he made the right distinction. He said, those who want to destroy our country at this point are in a violent revolt against the government. That's the reality of the situation. On the other hand, those who are with the Trump movement and with what Charlie Kirk was trying to establish, are basically, in a situation in which, right now we are the city builders. We are the people who built Western civilization. We are the people who actually do things and change things culturally in the direction which mankind is actually mandated to act by God himself. So what you're seeing is an unpollable, and I emphasize that, explosion throughout the country at this point of a return to churches, for one thing, because people are actually seeking that texture which has been missing in all of our politics of morality over the last decades. And you're seeing an explosion among youth. My dream in terms of where I would like Prometheian PAC to be as 2026 rolls around is I would like to be able to deploy young people who show up at your door and knock on it and say, hello, I'm the future. What do you think about actually creating it with me? And that to me is the most powerful kind of tool you can have. Now, KPUSA is exploding. We have a little bit different philosophical orientation in terms of both Prometheian Action and Prometheian PAC, in terms of much more Plato, as Susan would have it, rather than Aristotle, much more actually very conscious of the American system, going back to our work in American history starting in the 1970s, not so much, what is put forth by, various institutions on within the Trump movement at this point, about what our actual revolutionary history looks like. And we'll be making major contributions to the celebrations of 2026, which I think will actually educate a ton of people about our actual history, which they've not been able to have in any college or university course over the past period. And that's my dream. We're not where we would like to be, most certainly. We are growing, but we need people to actually, recognize that what we're putting forth is probably unique on the American political scene. And it's being echoed in everything that Donald Trump is actually doing to bring about a dramatic change back to our own culture and our own history as the most unique institution in the entire world and all of human history. And that dawning realization, the biggest obstacle we're going to have here is that people think of themselves as passive observers of the political scene. People think of themselves as little, as kind of little me, what can I do? As opposed to embracing the fact that you're going to be, you're going to be thinking about, again, my idea of having a young person show up at the door and knock on it and say to you, I'm the future, you want to help me create it. I think that's how you find out what our mission in life is really all about. So that's how I'd answer your question. We're not where we need to be, but we're growing and we appreciate everybody's help, and we really could use all sorts of upscale staffing to do much, much more. But we need the resources to do that.
Let me just add two things. Since I want to thank everybody who's watching this now and subsequently, because it has been the growth of our audience, in particular on these YouTube shows, that has created a vast jump, both in our financial support and in our memberships. I mean, since these shows took off earlier this year, we've increased many times over on both fronts. So I want you to know that. We're very, very excited about that. And we want to continue to increase many, many times over. I wanted to address one other thing in terms of the midterms, because I've been, as people know, I'm a vice chair for coalitions of the Michigan Republican Party. And one of the discussions that goes on in Michigan, certainly in many other states, but in particular the swing states, is the shocking low turnout in elections, especially off-year elections, of evangelicals and churchgoers. I mean, literally single digits in some cases, in terms of the people who even turn out to vote. And I think what we've witnessed in terms of what the assassination of Charlie Kirk has done in terms of awakening a level of responsibility for the political future of the country as well as your own individual salvation is unprecedented in our lifetimes. And I think it's going to have a major, major effect. It has to be nourished. It has to be cherished. It has to be organized. We're going to have the biggest get out the vote operation in American history, I think, in 2026 to make sure that all of these layers which are awakening now recognize their responsibility, fulfill their responsibility. I'm sure there will be many organizations out there doing that. Find one, participate with it, find it now, get yourself trained. But I think the combination of what we're bringing in terms of a kind of strategic and historical clarity of this fight and the depth of it, plus the emotional depth, which has now been triggered in the wake of the Kirk assassination, really does give us the potential to do it, but we can take nothing for granted. And I will follow up on what Adam said. Yeah, we did sort of drop out of the sky in terms of our friend from West Virginia asking how he could help us. Just so people who are joining us and may not be aware, Prometheian Action earlier this year in March sent a team of, I think it was about 7 or 8 people. They spent a week in Washington, D.C., visiting members of Congress and the Senate. They proudly wore their MAGA hats, although one of our friends has a hat that says relax, it's just a red hat, which everyone knows what it means. They had an enormous impact. They had congressmen grabbing them, saying, I like your hat. What is this all about? They had one congressman, they were on their way up to an appointment, an appointment which had been set. Congressman got in the elevator with him and said, what are you doing here? We explained to them. He said, where are you going? We said, we're going to the 4th floor. He said, no, you're not. You're coming with me. And he took them to their office for a briefing. Our message was very much that Donald Trump's policies are reviving the American system, that not enough of you congressmen and staffers fully understand the implications of this, because Congress has been in this controlled environment where it's about spending money or not spending money. Well, obviously, there's a lot of wasteful money that we're getting rid of. But as Trump is very clear, we got to build our way out of this crisis. And that's what the American system is. So we shared with serious people our ebook. Adam, if you want to share the screen for a minute, I'll find the ebook and show people what we shared. We shared this with them, which is a basic primer on the American System 2.0. We also shared the ebook I showed you earlier on it's the British who kill our presidents. So we had an amazing impact just in terms of a quality of in-depth discussions. Now, not all of them. Some of them they gave us 5 minutes pro forma and said thank you very much, and sent us on our way. But we're going back, and what we're asking people to do is to contact their congressmen and senators on our behalf, say Prometheian Action represents my ideas, represents me. They will be in Washington, D.C. the week of October 6th through October 10th. And I would like to set up a meeting with the member of Congress. Those are pretty hard to do, but you can try. Or a senior staffer, chief of staff or legislative director to discuss with Prometheian Action what has to be done to fulfill Donald Trump's revolution. So that's what we're going to be doing the week of October 6th through 10th.
Thank you, Susan. We got quite a few messages of support and 2 questions that I'm going to take for a sec. First, I'd like to thank Alabama USA for your super chat. Thank you for tuning in. This is our 9th show. I think you've been here for many of them. Thank you for the truth. I was blind, but now I see. Eyes wide open, MAGA. Thank you, Alabama, for your support. Now we're going to take 2 super chat questions that came in very quick that are very similarly related. Again, first from Ura. Is it possible the communist, socialist, satanic Democratic Party is on the way out of the political arena? Quick comment for myself. It's coming. It's on the horizon, but it's not there yet. Right?
I'll add something else. Add something else, which is that the globalists know this. They're not stupid. They operate, across the centuries and the generations. They can see the writing on the wall. And right here in Michigan, we have, I think, what is going to be a very interesting test case. The Democratic mayor of Detroit, who's a bit of a centrist, but he's really a World Economic Forum plant, is running for governor of Michigan as an independent. Now, everybody says that's crazy. Independents can't win. In a race like in a place like Michigan, which is very purple, voted for Trump, but we still have our Democratic strongholds in Detroit and Flint and so on and so forth. But this Mayor Duggan is getting backing from the mega donors from both political parties. The old Republican Party of Wall Street and War, the billionaires, the billionaire developers, and so on. I do not rule out that this is the test case for the globalists' next phase as they recognize that, as Ura said, the Communist Socialist Satanic Democratic Party is on its way out of the political arena. I don't know that you're going to see this developing that clearly anywhere else in the country, but I'm encouraging people, keep your eye on Michigan. This is a test case by the World Economic Forum for what might come next for them, which of course we're not going to let happen.
You just got to remember the maximum of the modern British Empire, which is we have no permanent friends, only interests.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. We're getting more support. I want to give a quick shout out to Dog Nose 2. Great show. Even Adam, thank you so much. It means you guys, all 3 are great. Thank you so much. Just a quick reminder, if you're new here, please like and subscribe to this channel. We do 3 political briefings a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. We do this 1 live show every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Like and subscribe, please. And if you want to get email notifications, we have a free newsletter, completely free. Check the link in the description and we'll send you updates. We're going to send you daily updates. There's just so much going on. We're going to update you daily. Okay, let me get to the other question, which is exactly related. And we get so much love from California. It's crazy. Conchinita, do you have any hope for California? You know what? Really quick comment. I actually do have hope for California. Don't forget that California used to be a primarily Republican state. So there is precedent for a more conservative California before the whole Hollywood 68 thing.
Yeah, I'd like to just give a little bit of a shout out to, there's a campaign by Minnie Pechenik being run out there for Oakland mayor, which if you look at the heart of the destruction of California, there's no other place that exemplifies it more than Oakland. All right, that's an uninhabitable zoo at this point, with crime completely out of control, drug addiction and psychosis completely out of control, all being stoked by the ridiculous governor of California, as Trump likes to call him, Newsom. And, Newsom basically probably could be held responsible actually for the ICE shooting, which occurred yesterday, because he spent the entire day before attacking ICE in a very personal way, essentially saying they should be unmasked and therefore open to whatever we throw at them from Antifa and others. So I have a lot of hope for California, because if you actually look at it, you'll see that it's just the coast that is mostly crazy. All right. It is just the coast that is crazy. The rest of the state is all red. And, you know, basically it just needs a different kind of organizing spirit that I think Mindy's campaign actually represents, than, you know, the type of spirit that says Oakland could become again the shipbuilding heart of the nation, like it once was. You know, Oakland could become again, you know, a major manufacturing center like it once was. You've got the University of California, Berkeley, famous for all of the Antifa and other leftist craziness that actually came out of the 60s, but also the heart of American scientific capabilities at Lawrence Livermore Lab. So, and you have the entire space industry in Southern California. There's a reason why Musk still had some space facilities right around Southern California. So there's great hope for California, but, you know, basically they need support. They need the help of other people recognizing that. I point out that in New Jersey right now, which is somewhat considered to the bluest of bluest states, you know, the Republican gubernatorial candidate is polling dead even with the Democrat for governor. So there's a lot of hope out there. And as I said, you can't poll the transformation which we've seen over the course of the Kirk assassination aftermath in this country. So yeah, there's definite hope for California.
Yeah, I agree. It's just the coast. And don't forget, Orange County, California, right above San Diego, was the only coastal county in all of California that went Trump. And I thought that was so significant. I don't want to dox myself too much, but my parents live in northern San Diego County that basically borders Orange County, probably the most Republican part of Southern California. So I was very happy to see Orange County go for Trump. I'd like to give a shout out for Laura. Thank you very much for the super chat. Let me just circle back in case anyone's just tuning in. This is Prometheian Action's live Thursday question and answer show. We do this live every Thursday. Please like and subscribe to this video if you're enjoying our discussion. We have 3 political updates a week. Okay, so we're going to get back to our questions here. We're on the 20th. I don't think we're going to be able to get through all 50 of them, but we still have some very thought-provoking questions coming. This is one that's on everyone's mind. Most of our chat's thinking about this. The growing militant Muslim presence in the USA is extremely concerning. We see what's happened in Europe and the UK. They threaten our freedom of religion, freedom of speech, yet are allowed to openly express and grow their desire for supremacy. What are we to do about this threat that is now flourishing in our politics? Thank you, Marilyn. Open.
All right. Well, I'll take a crack at this first because I'm sitting in a city which borders both Dearborn and Dearborn Heights, Michigan, which often are the focus of hysterical social posts, social media posts, and so on. And I will say some of the hysteria perhaps is justified, but in a very limited way, because I think people have to recognize that when you are talking about Muslim Americans, when you are talking about Islam, you are talking about 2 different groupings. You have patriotic Muslim and Arab Muslim Americans who love Donald Trump, who love our Constitution, who love our country. Donald Trump won the state of Michigan largely because of the vote of Muslims in Dearborn, Dearborn Heights, and Hamtramck. That was probably the critical margin in terms of shifting Wayne County, a traditionally overwhelmingly blue county, with enough of a margin that Trump could take the rest of the state. So I think people have to put a lid on it in terms of just taking a broad brush. Two of the people who played a critical role in Donald Trump's victory, the mayor of Dearborn Heights and the mayor of Hamtramck, are now ambassadors for the United States of America for Donald Trump. So please stop using a broad brush. Then you have radical fundamentalist Islam, which is a creation of the British intelligence services and the British Empire. And that, yes, that is as dangerous as anything else which the British Empire has created. So I think it has to be approached from that standpoint. Obviously, Barbara can probably remind me of the name of it. The current king of England, Charles, as a prince, founded a major Islamic cultural center in Britain, has been one of their major patrons of it for years. It was given official crown something or other at a particular point. Barbara might remember the details. I don't. This is this is one of the driving forces in terms of this radical Islamic fundamentalism, which is used as a very dangerous weapon against all kinds of civilization. So I think if we keep our eye on the ball, which is the actual enemy that creates many of these things, including Christian Zionism, then we'll be able to dry it up and ensure that our fellow citizens who may practice a different faith than we do are not demonized in the course of this. I take this very personally because I know the role that Muslim Americans played, patriotic Muslim Americans played in putting Donald Trump into office in 2024. I don't know if Barbara wants to add anything.
I only want to point out that we, meaning the captured United States prior to Donald Trump, and British intelligence have used radical Islam or Salafist Islam as a terrorist component for irregular warfare, throughout the period of the existence of the Soviet Union, to actually attack Russia on its southern flanks through Afghanistan. We build up an entire network of mercenary terrorist warriors to do our warfare for us. And, in many respects, it came back to bite us on 9/11, 2001. It just shows you the intelligence control of this particular radical Islamic operation. There are books which have been written about it, which, Mark Curtis's Secret Affairs actually details it from the standpoint of the actual archives of British intelligence. It shows you where it came from, as do many other religious, I'll call them cults, which are used for intelligence purposes rather than being genuine religious beliefs. So that's the difference. And, it is a very small percentage of the Muslim population of the entire world. Right now, for example, Indonesia is offering to be a stabilizing force in Gaza, and to come in and actually, help create the basis for creating a viable Palestinian entity there. So you have to really read your history a little bit and not get stuck in the British Empire essentially runs religious warfare. That's a fundamental thing to understand about controlling mechanisms. And when you have religious warfare, it is the most difficult type of warfare to extricate yourself from, because you've created armies which are all based on the idea that God is telling me what my mission is in terms of this particular war, and I'm going to heaven because I'm doing God's will here in terms of religious warfare. They've done this over and over and over again when they're trying to basically control resources or loot a country. and most particularly in the Middle East for God knows centuries now. So that's the only caveat I would add to everything that Susan said.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is going to be from Valerie, who's a great supporter. I had some conversation with her earlier this week, and she has a question about environmentalism. Whoops, excuse me. Wrong layout. Excuse me. Too many buttons here. When talking about green policy, please give specifics, i.e. geoengineering, weather, crops that may poison people, windmills that cost more to build than they produce, etc. Unfortunately, many do not know about these consequences. They think Trump wants to stop recycling or something. Well, let me let you in a little secret. Most recycling isn't what you think it is. Most plastic, when you think you're recycling, you're not recycling it. So I don't think he wants to stop that. Also, I found half-page flyer relevant only to Republicans. I feel all need to know about Promethean Action. Could you make one that highlights our history of British interference and how they dominate world politics? I found more people open to hearing that. Thank you, Valerie, for your question. I open the floor here to Barbara and Susan.
Barbara, why don't you take the first part and I'll take the second. You're muted, Barbara.
I think we went through before how basically environmentalism has been a tool of the British Empire for purposes of colonial conquest since, it was actually invented. And particularly if you look at that entity called the World Wildlife Fund for Nature, and you'll find in the descriptions links to various things we actually did in the past showing you that. The thing is, just as Trump said, all of your economies are collapsing because you've adopted these green policies. Most importantly, your populations are collapsing. We're in demographic collapse across the advanced sector because we've basically instilled the belief in people that children are an unnecessary inconvenience. Whereas, children are vital both to the human soul and also vital to, the actual utility of continuing human progress here on Earth. So, that's the evil of environmentalism. It was designed to do exactly that. One, destroy population growth. Two, inculcate a pessimism within people about not being able to control nature being an all-powerful force which mankind can't manipulate to advance or progress, which is exactly the opposite of what Trump believes, what Stephen Miller just said. We're the city builders. We're the people who build out stuff, and who could say to those who come after us, I built a better future for you than I had coming into this, which has been at the root of everything we used to believe was essential to human life. So it is a complete evil. It doesn't mean we shouldn't have clean air or clean water or all of the things which you can do through science. Obviously geoengineering weather, which is a big thing on the internet right now. I'd like to be able to control the weather a whole lot better. I'd like to be able to actually talk about how we can create rain without poisoning people in areas of the country that are subjected to droughts. That is kind of what human ability to actually make nature better is really all about. But, environmentalism itself and everything it has stood for is absolutely evil.
All right, Valerie, I really appreciate the second question. Adam, could you share the screen? Okay. This is the half-page flyer that Valerie is referencing. This is put out by Prometheian PAC. Again, Prometheian PAC is our campaign arm to which only American citizens and permanent residents can contribute. But we have produced a half-page flyer which makes clear that the Republican Party is now the party of workers. And that's the front page of it. The second page of it, which Valerie is referencing, we have revised, and I don't know if this will help, because the previous version, instead of simply saying the Uniparty, said the GOP wing of the Uniparty, and you're not the first person to make the point that it kind of leaves out the Democrats. So this is the third version of the half-page flyer, as Adam has put right down there. You can get a copy. You can order copies of this from Prometheian PAC by going there and getting anywhere from 100 to 1,000 copies to distribute. Many people are getting a lot of traction with this, but it is the case that I did write this and design this from the standpoint of discussions I was having with delegates all over the state of Michigan who needed clarity on the fact that Donald Trump was creating a new Republican Party, as opposed to everything else that we have, which is the entirety of the Democratic Party pretty much, and, the old establishment wing, if you want to call it that, of the Republican Party. But I am more than open to suggestions in terms of how to improve this or create different versions for different audiences. And Valerie, we are definitely taking under consideration your point about doing something which highlights the American system versus the British system. So very much appreciate the input. We're thinking about it, we're working on it, and our ability to, expand this and create different versions of it is also very much dependent on people organizing with the existing one and helping us with the resources.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. Okay, let me just give a quick shout out here to my t-shirt. Yeah, this t-shirt I created, it's in the Prometheian Action store. I'm going to go and pin it. So it'll probably show up in a live stream for just a few seconds. If you're interested in supporting the channel and you'd like to show off our style, please get the Stay Creative shirt. It features Albert Einstein, who is arguably the father of almost all 20th century sciences. He won the Nobel Prize, not for general relativity. He won the Nobel Prize for his description of the photoelectric effect, which basically was the basis for things like semiconductors and lasers, which basically are the basis of modern computing. So if you'd like to support our channel and give tribute to Albert Einstein, you can pick up a shirt. YouTube should be featuring it, and the link is also in the description. Okay, so next we're going to come to some international questions which surround Israel and the Rothschilds and Rockefellers. It's going to be the next one here. Next question is from, excuse me. No, I got ahead of myself here. Okay, number 26, that's what it was. Okay. I have a love-hate with Trump. I am deeply concerned about the digital concentration camp being built out by people of the likes of Peter Thiel and Trump's deep ties to Israel. Netanyahu boasts that he owns Trump and that Trump still does his bidding. I won't vote Democrat and I won't vote J.D. Vance. Praying a true America First candidate comes up to the top. Thank you, Kurt. This is the kind of sentiment that many people echo in our circles. So I open it for Barbara and Susan.
Again, Peter Thiel, Palantir, does that mean that Trump is Netanyahu's tool? No, it means that Peter Thiel and Palantir, and along with Israel, are deeply involved in creating defense and surveillance technologies. How we control those technologies is up to you and me in terms of how we actually look at it and see its usage and make sure that it's not being used on American citizens at all, which I happen to believe President Trump is deeply committed to. Netanyahu boasting that he owns Trump. Well, I think that what's going on around a potential peace in Gaza, let alone the Abraham Accords, actually would show you a very, very different story. look, you're dealing with a very complex dynamic. Put yourself in Trump's shoes. All right. Are you going to say to the entire state of Israel, which has nuclear weapons, go screw yourselves? Are you going to say to the rest of the Middle East, the Arab populations, which have never actually come in to support a Palestinian state in reality? As Bill Clinton even said in a clip I saw, in talking about the things he worked out with Rabin, basically we offered a full Palestinian state with United States guarantees in 2000, but the Palestinians wanted to keep killing the Israelis. That's Clinton talking about, his most fundamental breakthrough in terms of a Middle East accord. So, I think yesterday, at least according to reports, Trump met with all of the Arab states on the sidelines of the UN and outlined his peace plan for Gaza, which does not cohere at all with what Netanyahu wants to do. All right. It basically says you can't annex the West Bank. It basically says that, there's going to be an Arab peacekeeping force in Gaza, not an Israeli peacekeeping force in Gaza. It basically says that going ahead full blown with the type of offensive you're talking about in terms of killing off the last of Hamas, which can't happen, is not going to go forward. It puts forth a plan for an immediate ceasefire. And basically, Witkoff walked out of that meeting with a thumbs up, saying that he expects we're going to have a settlement because the Arab states have committed for the first time in many respects, given that they will all also be joining the Abraham Accords and recognizing the state of Israel and not deciding that we're going to be at permanent war with Israel, which is still the official position of everybody who hasn't joined the Abraham Accords. There's a complex situation, all right? And no, Netanyahu does not control Trump. Trump knows that to actually prevail with the Israeli population, he's got to be, as he says, more popular with the Israeli population than Bibi Netanyahu is. And that was and is his entire strategy going into the Abraham Accords. That is, I believe, his entire strategy right now. On Monday, he meets with Netanyahu after this meeting, on the sidelines of the UN yesterday. He needs, politically, this entire thing to be settled precisely because no one can not look as a human being at what's going on in Gaza and not be appalled. That's the truth of the situation. Various people are trying to take advantage of that in terms of their own beliefs about the primacy of the Jews, so-called, in current history, which is a false belief, quite frankly. And probably there are other questions in the queue where we'll have a chance to address much more of that. But, Israel could turn, as Netanyahu said, into super Sparta. That is very, very dangerous conception. It has been somewhat that at the behest of both the British and the United States for a very long time in terms of providing stability in the Middle East as a kind of will allow you to exist, but you got to basically destroy anybody who threatens the oil interests or who threatens our control of raw materials and the crossroads in this area. So it's complicated and always has been complicated by World War II and the fact that the Jews who were exterminated in Europe needed a place of their own to go. Complicated by the very insane solution of putting them right in the center of Palestine, which, quite frankly, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem and the Palestinians had sided with Hitler in World War II. So think about that. Think about the actual nature of that scheme, all right, which has embroiled the area ever since. So that's how I'd answer the question to begin with.
Let me just add on J.D. Vance. Look, J.D. Vance has evolved. He converted to Catholicism after a very profound intellectual investigation and spiritual, I'm sure. He was against Donald Trump originally. He changed. Now you can sit there and say, oh, this is a big Machiavellian scheme to put somebody next to Trump who blah, blah, blah. Charlie Kirk evolved. The most important thing about Charlie Kirk was that he was a passionate truth seeker. And as he investigated issues and policies and so on, and realized that he had not had a full understanding of it, his ideas evolved. And that's how I look at people like J.D. Vance. And I hope people themselves will evolve from the standpoint of actually looking at the underlying commitments that people have, what as best you can understand their philosophical outlook, look at their actions, hold their actions up to reality, and make your decisions from that standpoint, not the fact that at one point in their life, they are connected to something.
Thank you, Susan. All right, we're in the last 10 minutes. We've been going for about an hour and 50 minutes. So before we take the last few questions we're going to take today, let me do one final shout out here. If you're joining us for the first time, this is Prometheian Action's Thursday question and answer show. We do the show every Thursday live, and we take questions primarily from our newsletter supporters, but we also get questions from the chat here. If you're interested in asking a question and you really want to make sure we see it, your best bet is to get our free newsletter. Tomorrow, when I send out the recording of the show, I'm going to put a link in tomorrow's email that will have a link there where you can ask questions for next week's show. So if you want to get on our newsletter and get that email update for the recording of the show, you can visit the website that's down below, prom.ac. You can click the link in the description, or you can search the web for Prometheian Action. We also do 3 political updates on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Please like and subscribe. Hopefully YouTube sends you a notification. Okay, so let's get to the next question here. Press the right button. Okay. How do the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and other elite Europeans and American families fit into the British Machiavellian scheme you have described to us? Thank you, Eve.
Well, through adherence to the edicts of what I've been calling, and what others like the author Richard Poe calls the Third British Empire. Basically the Rockefellers, most people on Wall Street, particularly the Morgan and Harriman interests, the Rothschilds are, basically bankers and financiers of this entire kind of oligarchical framework we've been talking about, which doesn't produce things, as Stephen Miller basically emphasized. Instead, it goes out and steals and loots everything else and seeks to control the very means of existence for most of humanity. Just look at, raw materials and their dominance of oil during the period where oil was the primary energy source for all of industry in the world. Look at their dominance of all of the rare earths and other minerals, which has been their scheme in Africa throughout this entire time period. Look at the insurance companies, which allow things to actually be transported throughout the world. Make what used to be called a bill of materials, where you actually look at the world economy in terms of, okay, over here are resources which we have to have a viable economy. Over here is the labor force, which we have to have and educate at a certain level to have a viable economy. How much of that is actually being controlled through British corporations and British policies and British banking policies at this point? Think about climate change, where essentially, through the UN and other mechanisms, out of the 2008-2009 financial collapse, we made it a point of giving credit to any company that they adopted a zero carbon agenda. What did that do to, your basic ability to actually have an economy which wasn't crashing? Europe is crashing. at this point, as Trump described in his UN speech. We have an underlying extremely vulnerable and fragile economy because of everything that Biden did to bring us into line with the British Empire. So some people think that the Rothschilds are at the center of the empire. That's not true. You know, names like Cecil, the royal families of Europe, including the Habsburgs, which, you know, are kind of the opposite of any Jewish intellectual tradition. You know, that's who runs things, along with these huge multinational corporations under British imperial stock control. And, you know, the Rothschilds and others simply serve this. Rockefeller in the United States was enormously important. But what was he doing? Where was that fortune built? On oil and railroads, all right? Essential part of controlling any economy. So you have to take a name, and in my view, the way to look at this and attach it to what do they own? How does that function in a real economy? And then you understand the nature of real political power.
Yeah, I think we're gonna end on this question here, because it's a question that keeps coming up. It's clearly ingrained into part of the United States and the world. So I'm going to take these last three questions, and we're probably going to end on this.
Adam, you muted yourself.
I did a reversal. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. We're less than 5 minutes away here. I'm going to take the last three questions, which is a question's on everyone's mind. It's a continuation of the last three. So let me just play them up here real quick. How can you deny that Trump is a Zionist and isn't for America first? Thank you, Lloyd. It's increasingly obvious that Trump is a Zionist. Why are you all in denial? Where does AIPAC figure into things? Out of the top 25 recipients of AIPAC money, which is a huge sum, 22 are either Dems or rhinos. Could this be a reason Charlie was looked at? Was he starting to question these payments? Thank you, Keith. So the last question we're going to take up today is Zionism, Judaism, and AIPAC. So I'd open the floor here.
You have to basically make it number one, Trump is not a Zionist. You know, number two, you know, yes, his daughter and son-in-law and Susie Wiles have all had contacts with various Zionist entities, but practicing Orthodox Judaism isn't really very close to Zionism, as Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump actually practice it. What you're really talking about when you talk about Zionism in the United States is you're talking about two political interests which have held in the post-war period a great deal of power. You're talking about Zionist entities per se, and there's all sorts of differentiations within them. And you're talking about something which can be described as Christian Zionism. If you asked me what was a more powerful force in politics in the United States, I would tell you that I believe it's Christian Zionism. And that is the particular, you know, kind of national security arrangement wherein what's actually talked about is that if there's Armageddon in Israel, that actually results in all of the edicts of Revelation being revealed. And, you know, as a result, the Republican Party, for the most part, has been somewhat captured by this, you know, much more than any AIPAC or anybody else, which actually allies with the Christian Zionists. There's a book by my friend Click Kirikoff called Dark Crusade, which actually deals with how this is, again, one of these British religious cult inventions imported through the Darbyite phenomenon into the United States. And it will cause you to step back and do some deep thinking about exactly what is this, all right? And what's the difference between that and the overall image of man and human beings in service of God, the Creator, which is at the heart of the American philosophical and religious tradition. I believe that Tucker Carlson is freaked out, all right, to answer where a lot of this stuff is coming from at this point. And he's freaked out because he's been targeted. He's been targeted in a way, starting when he first actually came out against the Ukraine war. And he's not used to that. He's not used to the actual political combat, which is actually involved in saying, I'm going to put it all on the line and give up everything and fight for my beliefs. So he's allied with Candace Owens. And you have this whole internet phenomenon at this point saying the problem is with Trump that he's controlled by Netanyahu. That is emphatically not true. And as I said, wait till you see what I think is going to play out. I can't predict it, but I can see what Trump's intention is. All right. I can see what Trump's intention is. His overall intention is he wants peace in the world. The other side, the British Empire, needs all of these wars to continue at this point. They need them to continue because without them, they collapse. That's what's going on in Europe and everything else. They need a defense, thing to collapse. Do I have some sympathy with Tucker Carlson in terms of what he's suffering from? Yes, I do, but he's off the wall here, to be blunt. And the result is going to be not what he wants. He's not going to be listened to by Donald Trump at this point, because Donald Trump right now is passionately trying to bring about a peace in a very, very complex historical situation. Can he do it? Everybody else who's tried it in the last 2 centuries has failed. All right. And that's the actual truth of the matter. And it's not because of Zionism. There's a particular form of Zionism called revisionist Zionism, as put forward by a guy by the name of Jabotinsky, who is very closely related to Benny Netanyahu. In fact, his father was Jabotinsky's secretary. And when you look at the thing which I have in the chat called Palmerston Zoo, it's a presentation from 1994, but it gives you the real scoop on that form of, Zionism called revisionist Zionism, which really has very little to do with the actual best interests of the Jewish people or the Jewish religion, to be blunt. So that's how I'd answer your question.
Yeah, I just want to sort of make my own concluding remarks, keying off of that. From the standpoint of political pessimism, and deliberately spread political pessimism as a tool of the enemy operations. I mean, frankly, you can go back to World War II with Tokyo Rose and Axis Sally, right? Saying to the troops, give up, soldier boys. Your girlfriend is sleeping with your best friend back at home. You're going to lose, and so on. This is frankly no different than that. I mean, it might be a little bit more sophisticated, but Trump is controlled by this. This person is controlled by that. This person is controlled by that. We can do nothing except expose. That is not how Donald Trump became president of the United States, and is carrying out the greatest challenge to the British Empire, certainly in our lifetimes, and probably going back to the 19th century in the United States, when you had American system presidents who had allies like Russia and Germany and China and France and Japan and so on. And the British Empire saw that their days were numbered. And they launched wars, they launched assassinations, they launched economic warfare. We've lived through over 120 years of that. And I think we're coming out at the other end, where people are beginning to understand these methods of the British. And we've created a political movement. Donald Trump created a political movement, but many of us have participated in the United States, which actually has the potential to bring that down. And my attitude is, whenever I see one of those Tokyo Rose things, this person is controlled by that, this person is controlled by this, we're never going to change anything. I just think that it's somebody who's fallen prey to British psychological warfare, and hopefully this incredible movement, which is gaining more and more steam in the United States and worldwide in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination is going to sweep more people up into the fact that people change. Good has more powerful than evil. And I think if we have enough people fighting for the good, we're going to win this.
Okay. Thank you very much, Barbara and Susan. I want to say a final thing here myself. To everyone in the chat, thank you for participating. I know there are a lot of different opinions flying through the chat room there. Some people say, why don't you, censor this and censor that? I try to let things lean on the side of free speech a little bit more, but when things get a little bit too toxic, I do tend to step in. So I'd like to thank everyone in the chat who is sending in positive loves, all the people that send in questions and super chats. We are definitely going to be doing this next Thursday, so you can get your question in for next week. Any final things, lady, you'd like to end the show with?
Yeah, do your homework. I put a whole lot of things in the description for people to read and look at. And second, I'd like to remind people essentially that of that famous Shakespeare quote. And I think it applies to the American people at this point, which is the fault is not in the stars. It is that we think of ourselves as underlings. And that's really what has, if you think about it, we're coming through a period where very few people thought about politics. And now everybody thinks about politics. Okay. And that's great. Everybody's participating, but you've got to actually bring up your game to what the founders actually said, which is you're responsible. Okay. You're responsible for running the republic, not, essentially sitting on the sidelines, but actually thinking of yourself in 2 years, I'm going to run for Congress. You may be older and that's not really possible, but that's the kind of inspiration which you want to take to other people. I'm going to prepare myself to do that, to actually be able to do that competently and creatively. And that's how our republic is actually designed. But, if people don't participate in it to the fullest, it falls apart. And that's kind of the interesting design and trick that the founders played on you to actually try and make you realize the full potential of your humanity. So that's where I'd end things.
Susan, you good?
Nope,
Okay.
I said my piece.
All right. So with that, everyone, please hit the like button before you leave. If you want to stay in contact with us, get our free newsletter. You can just you can reply to any of our newsletters and get in contact with us. And yeah, we'll see you again next week. And thank you very much for tuning in.